Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. At 1 o'clock, Vancouver's mayor and police chief will present a public safety report into the Lapu-Lapu festival tragedy. We'll bring that to you live on our YouTube and streaming services. Up first, though, the BCGEU escalates its job action. How should the province approach the wage demands from public sector unions right now? We're taking your calls. After 12:30, what is school like for students with disabilities and complex needs? We'll hear about incidents of exclusion and ask you how you're feeling about the year ahead for your child. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming as well. And you can call us now on our top story. How should the province approach public sector labor negotiations and unions' wage demands? You can call us up. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 604-669-3733 or 1-800-825-5950. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave your comment on our TikTok Live. Thanks for joining us there as well. The BCGEU is escalating its job action. The union represents 34,000 public sector workers, and today it's picketing outside Ministry of Finance offices in downtown Vancouver. That's in addition to pickets at Surrey, Victoria, and Prince George. They have been up since Tuesday. Here's BCGEU President Paul Finch speaking earlier today to the CBC's Jonna Bailon.
We've escalated today because government's still refusing to come to the table, refusing to negotiate, refusing to come back with a fair wage offer. That's unacceptable to us, and polls show it's unacceptable to British Columbians.
What are the union's biggest concerns?
Well, right now, fundamentally, it's about the difference in compensation being offered by the government. You know, it's below inflation, it's below the maximum allowable rent increase, and then if you look eastward, it's below Conservative Premier Daniel Smyth's offer to civil servants in Alberta. That's unacceptable. We need a wage offer here that addresses the cost of living increase. Members have told us that clearly, loud and clear in their strike vote. They're telling us that today with this escalation.
The union is seeking an 8.25% wage increase over 2 years, plus cost of living adjustments. And Finch says the province's current offer is less than half that. Finance Minister Brenda Bailey would not confirm the government's offer to CBC, but pointed to the province's wider financial situation, saying economic circumstances have changed in the province. BC faces a record $10 billion deficit, and that has forced a hiring freeze and some layoffs as well. Now, besides the BCGEU, other public sector unions, including teachers and nurses, are heading into negotiations themselves. Teachers currently working without a collective agreement, and the BC Nurses Union contract expires in 2026. Here's Premier David Eby responding today to increasing wage demands from public sector workers.
Yeah, we're in a significant year for negotiation with the public service. That's teachers, nurses, government workers. We have had some success out of the gate, reaching a framework agreement with a significant number of healthcare workers in the province. We're bringing to the table fair offers, despite the fiscal headwinds we face. But the offers need to be fair, not just for the workers, but also for British Columbians as a whole. Each 1% in wage increase is about $500 million in cost to government. And so when 60% of our budget goes to wages, that's a big deal.
Okay, we're taking your calls on this. How do you think the province should approach these labor negotiations and unions' wage demands? You can call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or you can dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca, or certainly leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Joining me now is Les Leyne. He's the political columnist for the Victoria Times Colonist. Good afternoon, Les. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi.
Well, tell me more about the BCGEU's job action. Escalates today. There were pickets that were set up on Tuesday at various locations, including Victoria. What do you see as the goal of these pickets?
Well, it's escalation's kind of the buzzword for the past 48 hours. Where they started out with, they got 36,000 direct government employees which is a lot of clout. But I think about 2,600 went out on the first day after Labor Day, which is, a small amount. It's just a show of force. So it doesn't, I don't think it inconveniences the mass public very much at all. I ride by a building for years. I've been following the same route. I had no idea what was in it. And then yesterday, all of a sudden it's pickets. And I realized, it's a government building. Nothing to do with my life. It's kind of anonymous. And they were terming it as they were starting with inward-facing facilities, meaning that the general public wasn't going to notice it right off the bat. It just sends a signal to the government. And I think the interesting thing today is just the rate of escalation. They've added about 90 more strikers, a finance building on Howe Street in downtown Vancouver. So it's going to be a steady kind of incremental, I think, show of force just based on this strategy that's in evidence now for the past 2 days.
How much of that strategy do you think is to diminish or ensure there's not widespread disruption impacting the public when it comes to these negotiations in terms of public support and ensuring that they're able to maintain that somehow?
It's a real balancing act. Yeah, you want to. It's by definition, it's an adversarial situation. You're in the middle of a big fight. You want to hurt the enemy or the opposition, maybe I should say. But so you push as hard as you can. But in any kind of public sector strike, the government, the public is very much in play here. And over the years, I think recently I've noticed a lot of unions, public sector unions, are spending an extraordinary amount of time on communications and public relations. And they're always running ads showing what they're doing and demonstrating their value to people, how important they are to people's lives, and reaching out, I think, all over social media and whatnot. So they have to be very conscious of maintaining public support. These things kind of get serious when you notice all of a sudden the liquor stores are emptying. That's my signal that this is getting empty.
And they were quite affected last time around, right?
Yeah, that one lasted 2 weeks, and there was a mad scramble in the hospitality industry, and they got a fairly significant contract out of it for that and a few other reasons as well. But you want to balance inflicting as much pressure on management as you can without alienating, obviously, the people who are going to wind up paying your salaries.
Well, you mentioned the last round of contract negotiations and public perception. What's your sense? We're also dealing with inflation affecting everyone. It was interesting to hear Paul Finch, the president of the BCGEU, saying our members are taxpayers too. So what do you sense is the public sentiment right now around wage increases?
Well, I don't know. The inflation was a huge factor in the last round in 2022. It was just turning into the issue that you heard about constantly. It wasn't quite runaway, but it was getting there. Right. And coming out of the pandemic, there was a real appreciation of the public service. Everybody went through hell on earth and that relied on government much more than they normally did. The government didn't have much leverage to say, to be cheap and say we can't afford it and be miserly. So they negotiated a 14% raise over 2 years. That was a lot of money. That's a huge wage increase. No one in the private sector got deals like that. And I think maybe there's some expectation that maybe they can get close to that. And nobody's talking that number, but they want union, I think, wants to rely on that as kind of an indicator of something to strive for. And I don't think that's on for the public. Inflation is still an issue, but it's ebbed from the point it was 2 years ago. So I think the people will be kind of cagey in terms of, I think the bottom line for this is, when does it start hurting me in my neighborhood? When do I go into an office and find it closed, or go online and find that I can't get something done in my day? That's when it's going to start, people start making their judgments on this strike, taxpayers.
You're with BC Today. My guest is Les Leyne, who is a political columnist for the Victoria Times Colonist. We're asking you, as the BCGEU has added 90 more people picketing today in downtown Vancouver to its previous picket lines, 3 locations around the province starting last Tuesday. So as it escalates its job action, we're asking you, how should the province approach these labor negotiations with public sector unions and the union's wage demands? Where do you stand on that? You can give us a call, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. And you can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Our email, bctoday@cbc.ca. And our TikTok live is up, so you can leave a comment there too. Sophia is joining us now from Victoria. Thanks for calling in, Sophia. What are your thoughts about the wage demands and how the province should approach these negotiations?
I'm not in support of the strike. Speaking from a non-union profession, I'm just tired of all these strikes happening. It's like every day I wake up and read the paper, it's like another strike. And I feel like it's almost a form of manipulation for all of us that have to pay for that.
What do you think of, there have been, a number of strikes there. Canada comes to mind. That's, of course, dealing with the federal government. But, unions do have a right to strike. And this is,
of course I support unions, but I don't support how I know people that work in unions,
mm-hmm.
and the things I hear that go on, I just can't condone any of it. And between with all their flex days, this and that, and it's just one thing after another. And I feel like there's always, they have something to complain about no matter what union it is.
Sophia,
if it's the postal, whether what it is,
mm-hmm.
Normally I support it, but like for teachers or healthcare workers. But you know what? The wages I see they need more soldiers out there that get paid more. The management can get cut out because I feel like there's a lot of excessive hierarchy that's being paid a lot of money, and I don't support that. The workers, their wages, yes, I'm a support. We're all living without a living wage right now. Now, if you contrast that with people that are non-unions, you're going to see, and especially in my industry, which I'm a hairstylist, so we have no perks. So when we hear about these flex days and sick days and special requirements for they can't go to work at the office, this or that, it's just too much.
Sophia,
I'm really not in support of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call, Sophia. She touched on the postal workers strike as well, that went on for some time and affected, things last year as we head into the holiday. What do you make of that? Are people feeling like it's piling up, Les?
Well, I think the main trigger for most strikes is pretty simple. It's inflation. That's what really drives, I think, if you go back through history and time and look at the inflation rate, when it starts peaking, labor unrest follows, because the function of the union is to keep their members as well paid as possible, and everybody is, I think, acutely aware of what inflation does to your check. And walk into a grocery store anytime in the past 3 years, it hits you in the face every other aisle. So this is just the inevitable way to deal with inflation. Inflation goes away and strikes and labor unrest really do subside.
So Sophia also mentioned management, and this is something that the opposition party has raised as well. This morning, CBC's On the Island spoke with BC Conservative finance critic Peter Millibar, and he talked about the increase in the public service. Have a listen.
For the government to be semi-surprised that this is starting to unfold really shouldn't shock them. Part of the problem is that over the last several years, they've hired in the public service exponentially faster than the private sector has. that day has come back to roost now. And when you look at the numbers, a lot of it's actually in management and administration.
Les, what do you make of that criticism that the management administration has grown and become bloated?
I was actually startled this morning. I saw a transcript of a clip from Premier Eby, and he's talking about the fiscal headwinds that they've been, that's kind of their shorthand phrase for we're out of money and we can't afford much in the way of raises. But he also addressed, we have to address issues of administrative costs and bloat in the public service. That's a bit of a startling, that kind of raised my eyebrows, because what Peter Millibar was saying is just demonstrably true through the whole 7 or 8 years of the NDP government. The public sector has just exploded.
So he's acknowledging that?
Well, bloat isn't a very positive word, and I think they've acknowledged it. Basically, this year, the NDP has conceded that they've let the deficit get out of control, the spending. They walked in with a huge surplus, and they spent all of it, a lot more. Some of it was pandemic related, but the spending and all of it debt financed is just spiraled continually. $10 billion deficit, that's just in the operating year. This year is estimated, could be a lot higher. And I think the signaling from the finance minister and the premier has been, yeah, okay, we have a problem now. They tried to tackle it in health. They're trying to nibble $300 million out of health spending this year, just what the caller was saying on administrators and middle management. But when you hire so many tens of thousands more people in the broad public sector, like you can't have 10, 20,000 more line workers without more middle management and more what apparently we're calling now bloat. It's just inevitable. You need more management to go with it. So that's where it comes from. And that's why they are kind of basically pleading poverty. It's not, I think they're relying on the tariff war and the economic warfare instigated by the US. But I think a lot of the headwinds they're talking about are coming from this fiscal hole they've dug themselves into.
That Premier Eby now seems to say, yeah, that's right. So what kind of position does this put the province in then? As it's heading into or continues, I guess, negotiations with the BCGEU, although as I understand it, they're not at the table right now, but also heading into talks with the teachers and the nurses union. So what is the position the province is taking then?
Well, they're going to, it's really hard to, these things take on the dynamics in the actual room at the negotiating table. They can surprise you a lot. These miracles can come out of nowhere, or things can just go south in a very major way at the blink of an eye. It's very hard to figure this out. But right now, in short form, the government's offering the GEU about 3.5% over 2 years, with a couple of little wrinkles here and there. The union's asking for 8.2, and so they're 100% apart in short form, and they are going to have to find ways to bridge it. There's just a whole number of different ranges, and in the health sector, there's a kind of an extraordinary development where they've got a framework deal with the EU. That's quite startling, and some of the innovations in that might become applicable in the GEU talks. It just depends basically on how things go.
Josh is our next caller in Nanaimo now. Hi, Josh. Hi, Josh. Are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure can. Go ahead, please. What are your thoughts on these labor negotiations?
I've been hearing a lot of people saying, I support unions, and then coming up with all these excuses for why they don't support unions, like your previous caller. I just wanted to say that, for anybody who makes their income through working, is a worker, and instead of attacking other workers for asking more and trying to drag other people down, any workers should be looking at what unions are asking for and saying, hey, I want that too. So your previous caller, Sophia, instead of saying hairstylists don't get vacation, they don't get flex days, and so the public service shouldn't get those either, she should be saying, hey, the public service gets flex days, they get vacation, they get accommodations, they get higher wages. Hairstylists should be getting those things too. I think this is the whole idea of solidarity, workers working together and banding together to ask for more, to demand more, because that's the only power that workers have.
I'll ask you then, Josh. I asked Sophia, right, don't unions have the right to strike? And the sense I got from her was this frustration over a number of consecutive strikes just that have impacted her life. And do you get the sense that that's part of what that position or opinion might be?
I totally get that. And, it's not the unions or the workers' fault that they have to strike. It's widespread, economic mismanagement, across the board, and that's been happening for decades, right? The government has let things explode in terms of costs, and people are having difficulty living, and everybody's struggling. And so, because if the people in the union are struggling, is she saying they shouldn't try to not be struggling, or because other people who aren't in unions are also struggling, that the unions shouldn't be exercising their power to try and improve their lives, and then also hopefully the lives of other people, because what unions negotiate sets precedents for others. So if we do get a good deal, then that means other people can use that and say, hey, I want that too. And that's what they should be doing, instead of trying to tear unions down.
Josh, good to hear from you as well. Thank you very much for the call from Nanaimo. Two opposing views, or two differing views there, Les. I just have about 30 seconds. What are you going to be watching for then? Do you think there will be another increment, another escalation?
Yeah, it looks like slow and steady. They're not backing down, that's for sure. The one thing I'm kind of interested in, the government a few months ago appointed George Heyman as a special advisor in this situation. He's a former retired NDP cabinet minister, environment minister, but he ran the GEU. He was president for 9 years, about 15, 20 years ago. And now he's working for the management side. When the strike started...
I'm just going to jump in and say goodbye to our TV audience as we go into a break. And
sure.
Let's go back to you then, Les. You're talking about George Heyman. Yeah, go ahead.
So he's a special advisor to get this done. The strike started, and I thought, well, that didn't work very well. They're paying him $60,000 for this advice. But I'm informed that he's actually playing a kind of a role behind the scenes. He's not a mediator, and he's not a negotiator by any stretch, but he's kind of an intermediary. He's keeping lines of communication open with all the there's so many different tables in this public sector. And he's just keeping everyone, if not on side, at least in contact with one another. And I'm just curious, as this rolls out, that might be a valuable service. As people on the management side think highly of him, from what I can think of, and he might play a role further down the road. But generally, in short form, I think this might get much worse before it gets better.
On that note, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for watching this for us, Les. Good to talk to you today.
Take care, Michelle. Thanks.
You too. That's Les Leyne, political columnist for the Victoria Times Colonist. Lots of emails and TikTok comments here. Not here, man, on TikTok writes, I am forced to strike. I voted no to the strike. I'm happy with my wages, benefits, and not struggling. I'm getting from that post that you're a member of the BCGEU, I think is what I'm getting from there. Not here, man. Thank you. SW writes, as if the health account could afford to lose money. Okay, Charlene writes by email, having been in the union, rather than criticizing unions and their goals and strikes, I became firmly committed to the idea that all workers should fight to be represented by them. Thanks for the email. bctoday@cbc.ca. Another email here on that question of management and bloat, as has been described now. Kathy wrote us this email, trim the excess, too many managers, and that's where so much money goes. If there's a minimum wage, so there should be a maximum wage. When I hear the compensation for CEOs, I cringe. Decision makers at the top levels so far removed from the frontline workers' reality, spread the wealth. Thank you for that email. Again, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. Let us know what your thoughts are on the ongoing dispute and labor dispute and job action by the BCGEU. Again, bctoday@cbc.ca. This is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks for being with us. I hope you're having a good day. We are going to continue our show after 1 o'clock, by the way. You can join us on YouTube and on our streaming services. We will carry live the press conference where the mayor and the chief of the Vancouver Police Department are expected to present a report on public safety. And this is a report that was commissioned following the tragedy at the Lapu-Lapu Day Festival in Vancouver back in April. So we're going to carry that for you live here on the show on our visual platforms. In our next half hour, we will talk about schools and the experiences of students with disabilities, a report talking about the exclusion of these students and what's needed to ensure that they are included in class. We're taking your calls as well, asking you if you have a child with a disability, how are you feeling about the school year ahead? We'll take your calls along with the Family Institute of B.C. Right now it is 12:31, time for a CBC News Update, and here's Michelle Morton.
Good afternoon. Here are the headlines from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. On day 3 of job action, BC General Employees Union President Paul Finch says public service workers are prepared to strike for as long as it takes to get a fair deal from the province. And he says the union's escalating strike action is an effort to compel government back to the bargaining table. Premier David Eby says any deal made with the union must be fair to both workers and BC taxpayers. In Surrey, the province is promising to expand Clayton Heights Secondary School by adding 1,000 new student seats. The city has struggled with school overcrowding, and the school district has been forced to use more than 350 portables. Eby says he's also committed to providing more childcare centres in schools to help with before and after school care. And one property along the Coquihalla Highway has been ordered to evacuate, and 84 more have been put on alert due to a nearby wildfire. The Thompson-Nicola Regional District says the order and alerts are for the Mine Creek fire, which is now 1,900 hectares in size. The highway remains closed as motorists are being directed to take highways 1 and 3 as alternate routes between the Lower Mainland and the interior. In the local forecast by Environment Canada, a special air quality statement remains in place. Today, widespread smoke, highs of 23 except 27 degrees if you're inland, and similar conditions for this evening and cooling down to 15. Now back to BC Today with Michelle Elliott.
And how are you doing with the smoke, Michelle Morton?
I'm not going to lie to you, Michelle Elliott. I've been so excited to go running this week, and I know it's not a good idea because of what we heard yesterday from the BC CDC. So it's just, keeping those workouts indoors, which is so sad.
That's exactly right. I'm okay with that. I was the same last night. I thought I need some movement. But I headed inside for sure because it was just a little smoky outside.
I know, right? And we want to soak up this last bit of summer while we can.
Yeah, maybe not today. I hope you get that run in at some point.
Yeah, likewise.
That's Michelle Morton in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Lots more on the day's top stories on your afternoon shows in Metro Vancouver. Here's what's coming up on the Coast.
Hi there, Michelle. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I hope you can join us for On the Coast this afternoon. We're going to do a little bit of a tale of two cities for you. Kelowna and Coquitlam, they're about the same size and the same density, and they even have similar housing rules. So why did Kelowna manage to build 210 multiplex units in the same time period that it took Coquitlam to build 16? So tune in this afternoon to find out more about that. Also, we're going to take you live to a Surrey elementary school. We'll hear from students themselves about what they're excited for, fearful of, and what's on their minds as they head into a new school term. So I hope you can join us between 3 and 6 this afternoon for On the Coast.
Gloria, thank you very much. That's On the Coast starting at 3 o'clock in Metro Vancouver. And coming up again at 1 o'clock, we will be with you and stay with you live here on our visual platforms, YouTube, and our streaming service as well. We'll bring you the press conference with the Vancouver mayor issuing a report into public safety at public events. 12:35 now, you're with BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Well, children and youth with disabilities are routinely excluded from the classroom and from their peers. That's according to a report from the Family Support Institute of B.C. And this may mean a student being sent home or not being included in class activities or field trips, extracurricular activities. The report is called the Exclusion Tracker, and last year it found nearly 5,000 incidents reported by families. Earlier this year, BC's Ombudsperson Jay Chalk announced that his office has begun an investigation into the exclusion of students in BC schools from K to 12. Okay, we're taking your calls. How are you feeling about the school year ahead for your child with a disability or with complex needs? You can call us. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or you can dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca, and we are watching your comments on our TikTok Live as well. I should also mention that I have taken part in some workshops organized by the Family Support Institute. Joining me now is Angela Clancy, who is the Executive Director of the Family Support Institute of BC. Good afternoon, Angela. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a bit more about these incidents of exclusion? 5,000 found last year. Is that more or fewer than previous years? Do you know?
It's about the same. So we had, and I just want to start by saying, I know you said that it was the Family Support Institute Exclusion Tracker, and it is, but it originated with a grassroots society called the BC Ed Access Society, and we're now working in partnership with them. And so there was just over 4,800 incidents of exclusion this past school year, and the year before that, it was 5,973. Incidents of reported exclusion. And so even though that number has gone down a little bit, I want to be really clear, don't let the decline fool you into thinking that the problem is better. A lot of students have left the public education system as a result of exclusion.
I'd like to get into that with you as well in terms of what the recourse parents and families may have. But can you tell me more about these incidents? What do they actually entail and look like?
Yeah, so the way that the exclusion tracker is set up and has been set up for many years is if somebody feels excluded, then that would be a reportable incident. And so it can be anywhere from you're told you have to have a gradual entry at the beginning of the school year, or there's no educational assistance support, so you can't attend until there is. It can also be something like you're not allowed to attend field trips, or you must take your education in the hallway, or the only way you can attend school is if you're in a segregated classroom. And that list goes on. Sometimes it can be one incident, like, for example, one field trip. In the stats for last year, 26% of that over 4,800 reportable incidents were for 4 months or longer.
How does it go on for 4 months?
It's a really good question. I think one of the things that we've seen at the Family Support Institute and many other advocacy organizations have seen as well is that exclusion should be set up as a very last resort. And unfortunately, it's the first response. And what ends up happening is when a child is excluded, particularly not allowed to come to school or told you can only come for 15 minutes a day, there isn't a return to full education plan developed. There isn't a return to school plan developed. And so families end up flying into crisis, and students are left unsupported and not included or not attending at all because there isn't a really proactive way to respond to how do we get kids back in the classroom.
Okay, we would love to hear from our audience as well. My guest is Angela Clancy, Executive Director of the Family Support Institute of BC, and they've issued an exclusion tracker, and this is something that was started by the group BC Ed Access, and they have tracked the number of incidents of exclusion. You heard the examples there, finding 5,000 in the last year. We're asking you, how are you feeling about the school year ahead for your child with a disability or complex needs? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email bctoday@cbc.ca. You can leave a comment on our TikTok Live as well. And so, Angela, what is the impact on the student and their family?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, the very beginning, the ones that people would automatically think to is those kids aren't getting an education. They're not having the ability to learn alongside their peers. But there's other impacts. There is the loss of social networks and loss of peer relationship. When we think about the school community, when you see a child with a disability excluded or not permitted to come on field trips over and over and over again, it's extremely stigmatizing. And so it feels shameful. There's been a lot of research done that it correlates with increased depression, anxiety, trauma, and stress. Not only that, but it has contributed to dropping out of school, delinquencies, and an increased participation in the justice system. And so, those are the things that we know through research that we've seen for students. But there's also a lot of impact on the family. If you consider that at least half of the people who responded to the surveys live well below the poverty line, when they lose their employment, and that occurs when people are told again and again and again to come pick up their children from school, there's the loss of employment, which contributes to a loss of income, loss of benefits. What happens then is we're then contributing to that poverty. Families can't sustain that amount of recurring loss. So what ends up happening on top of that is the impact of parental mental health as well. Not only the economics of it, but their feelings of shame and less than, which is really put on them. And a lot of times these incidents of exclusion put that blame on the child, on their disability, on their background, because there's a high prevalence of Indigenous kids and racialized kids that are excluded as well. And then that contributes to those long-term effects. It's not just in the moment, it is long-lasting.
We have an email from Catherine in Penticton who writes, I just want to say this exclusion very, very much. I see it with my daughter who has autism. She'll run up to other children and they will treat her really meanly. I don't understand why there isn't more of an attempt by teachers, especially, to include them. Catherine, I appreciate your email, and I'm sorry that that's been your experience. Thanks so much for writing us. So, Angela, what are the attempts made then to resolve these cases?
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I can't encourage families enough to get an advocate. I think it's really, really important that you have someone standing alongside you, speaking with you on these issues, because sometimes those advocates will know the policy and the legislation and the rights under the UN Convention that we've signed on to. And I think all of that helps move us forward. I also think that having a good relationship with your school is key. We know that teachers, are pressurized in their jobs. We know it's a hard job, and we all need to be working together. And so I can't encourage families enough to get an advocate. But I think one of the things that we also need to recognize is that access to an education is a child's legal right. And when we start there and we know kids are entitled to this education, then we start with the how. And the how is the hard part. People often ask me, is it about funding? Is it about finances? And the solution is multifaceted. Funding and finances is part of it. Education is another part of it. A willingness and desire is a piece of it. Partnership, collaboration. There's so many different pieces, but I think oftentimes in these times of struggle, people become entrenched and they become they become stuck in the justification. So I really think we all need to start with it's the law. Now, how do we make this happen, and how do we ensure success for all students? And it's not easy, but I think as soon as we all align on that, we can move forward together towards those solutions that are really important.
Andrew is on the line in Victoria as we ask you how you're feeling about the school year ahead for your child who with a disability or complex needs. Again, our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Just hit pound 690 on your phone as well. That works too. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca, and you can leave a comment on TikTok if you're joining us there. And we're asking you this because of a report that's been published listing or outlining the number of incidents of exclusion that have been reported by families of children and youth with disabilities. Andrew in Victoria, hello. Thanks so much for calling us.
Hey, no worries.
Well, what's your experience?
I've always found the school system great. My own child is on the spectrum, but very high functioning. But I've always found them very accommodating at every level. I would just say, I do feel that it just sounded like a little bit of an attack on the teachers here. And you're having this debate at a time of day in the week when their side isn't going to come out. My own experience of being around other parents with children with disabilities, that a lot of them, I'm afraid to say it, are very quick to play the victim. And they'll just complain. I mean, 5,000, definitely a huge number of people's complaints about not being included. But I think we should be careful reporting that the way we are. And I think we should acknowledge that, some of those stories, I'm sure some are very valid, but some will be very questionable. And I don't like the way the report was making it sound like it's just across the board. It came across very accusatory, and I think that teachers are going to be pretty upset that they can't be calling in with some of their stories. I'm sure they're pretty sad too.
Yeah, and I'm about to ask about the BCTF, in fact, have been following or calling for an election promise from the province to be fulfilled. Andrew, I'm glad to hear that you have had a good experience, and you touched on, what Angela was just talking about, which is having a good relationship with a school. That would include teachers as well. And I'm wondering how that is for you. How do you approach it so that you're working together?
I think you just try and be honest with your teacher when you speak to them, and you offer your support. I do feel that a lot of parents want to, of course, it must be very difficult with some of the disabilities, and so maybe some of them treat the school system as their respite, I just need this out of my hair, I need a break. And I think that's where some of these issues unfold, and unfortunately you don't get a break, do you? And you've got to help out a little bit more and be a little bit more proactive. And like I say, I'm sure there are some pretty severe cases and justified, but just saying 5,000, I think it sensationalizes it a little bit, and I think there's way more to this story in these cases.
Andrew, thank you very much. And certainly we can't speak to each and every case, but let me just point to what the BCTF has said as well, because this is an issue that they've raised as well, and calling for this promise from the NDP during the election when they promised an education assistant in every classroom from K to 3. We were talking about labor unions just in the last half hour. And so the BCTF have been calling for the NDP to fulfill this promise of education assistance in every classroom from K to grade 3, counselors in every school as well. And they've raised the issue of the inability to include students because of lack of supports. Angela, Clancy, what are your thoughts on Andrew's comments there?
Yeah, I want to reiterate what you were saying. I'm really, really glad to hear you've had a positive experience in the schools. And I will say there are many, many positive experiences in the school systems all around the province. In terms of kind of blaming teachers, absolutely not wanting to ever blame anybody, actually. This is a systemic problem. It is a systemic problem that involves all of us, and we all need to be a part of the solution. And teachers have shared with us they're concerned about it too. They're concerned about their inability to support in the way they want to. Teachers are, they went into this line of work because they love children. They believe in inclusion. They believe in an education for all kids. And so the system is set up that they can't always do that the way they want to. And the ombudsperson's survey that they've been executing over the last several months has been enhanced to include teacher perspectives, because teachers have advised they want to tell their story. So I absolutely hear you. I think one thing I will say around, are we sensationalizing the data? I can appreciate your opinion on that. I think every single story has validity and needs to be told. And so it tells a story about a system that needs some repair.
And BC's ombudsperson, I should note as well, that started or announced this investigation earlier this year, that his office was investigating the exclusion of students from BC's schools, K-12, the public education system there. And Chalk's office is examining the extent to which K-12 students are being excluded and whether those exclusions are fair. And he wrote, "We will assess the role of the Ministry of Education and Childcare as well as school districts." And Chalk said, "I'm concerned about the outcomes for children who are excluded from school with little or no instruction." I did reach out to the Ministry of Education this morning seeking comment regarding this report, and they're working on getting us a statement right now as we speak. Thanks so much for the call. And our next caller now is Burton in Vancouver. How are you feeling about the year ahead for your child, Burton?
Hey, it's pretty complicated for us. We don't currently have a school for her. Last year, she experienced a tremendous amount of bullying and also trouble with teachers not being able to teach in a way that she could understand. And the only school in our area, or the school that we chose in our area, didn't have a lot of support for her. So we're looking at trying to get her last minute into a different school that's further away. And if that doesn't work, then I think we're stuck with private school, which is significantly more expensive for us, right?
I can imagine. What is the impact on you and your family?
Well, it means that my wife and I have to make sure that one of us is teaching. We have to switch our schedules around in order to get her the appropriate educational stuff and try to homeschool. And we both work full time, so that becomes harder. But yeah.
Yeah. Burton, thank you so much for sharing that. That recourse, that step of turning to the private system, Angela, is something you alluded to earlier. Well, how are families coping?
Yeah, it's so complicated. There's a lot of families. So I hear you, Burton. At the Family Support Institute, we hear from families all the time that don't have an assigned school, or they're being advised the school can't accommodate their children. And so families are turning to either private. That does mean you have to have the means to be able to pay for it. And that isn't every family. It's a struggle. The other thing is they're moving to either online learning or diversified learning, lots of different options, but there are pros and cons to those, and there is a parental responsibility that not all people can accommodate. And, the last caller had referenced that school can sometimes be used as a respite, and that's absolutely true. The kids do go to school, and they're there because they have a legal right to be there, and there's peer engagement. Hopefully that's positive. There's a huge prevalence of bullying. But when kids aren't in school, there's huge pressures on everybody else. And when they move to online learning or homeschooling or all of those different options, they lose out on all of those beautiful things that kids remember growing up. Who do I play with at recess? Who do I play with at lunch? Who's going to be my partner in this activity in class? And kids with disabilities don't always get those opportunities when they're in school, but they certainly don't get them when they're not in school at all.
Just want to read some comments here. Deanna wrote on TikTok, "Applause to teachers. They have a tough job." And John writes about some of these students have extreme violent and disruptive behavior patterns. And when parents are unwilling or uninterested in addressing their own children's issues, they offload in schools and teachers and claim their child is being excluded. What do you make of that? The concern that and teachers have and staff have raised it around violent incidents and behaviors?
It definitely has been raised, and we've heard that before. I think from our experience and many other advocacy organizations too, again, it's about the how. What is this? What does success look like for that student? A lot of times, school districts and school-based teams will develop a safety plan, and that's great. When somebody does have aggressive tendencies or they have reactive behaviors, you need to have a safety plan because we absolutely believe everybody has a right to be safe in school. At the same time, there is also a lot that can be done to prevent crisis from happening. And so schools can play a role in that. Schools can play a role in developing plans and strategies. You know, I do recognize, and one of the callers had mentioned, or maybe it was an email, the dwindling resources and supports that are available in the schools. And that's absolutely true. There's not enough professionals in the schools to be able to help develop those plans and implement them and modify them, tweak them as they need it.
I have just a couple of minutes left, but we've been talking about those dwindling resources at the provincial government level, dealing with a deficit right now. You know, what impact will that have on the supports that you're talking about?
I think we're going to see the trend continue to rise. I think, we're kind of hanging on with bated breath to see the data from the ombudsperson's office and the stats and what their recommendations are going to be. I know we met with them about a week into their survey, and they already had 1,500 respondents onto their survey. So it's probably going to be a staggering number. And hopefully we can work in partnership with the province to develop a plan to move forward so that this isn't happening and schools are well-resourced and well-supported to do the job they love doing. Because I agree with the one comment, credit to teachers. They have a very hard job, and it's probably one of the most important ones in the lives of our kids.
Angela Clancy, thank you so much for your time. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for
Angela Clancy is Executive Director of the Family Support Institute of B.C. Jamie writes, I'm studying to be an education assistant. I have a child in school who has some struggles but does not yet have a formal diagnosis. And the beginning of the school year is very challenging. Change is so hard in our house and comes with more challenging behaviors from my kids. I'm nervous about the year ahead, worried my child will experience exclusion, even though my EA training keeps telling me my child will not be excluded. It seems to depend on luck. Thank you, Jamie, for your email. You can write us BC Today at cbc.ca.